you didn't think you were going to get another Side Notes episode, did you all? But again, so it doesn't get things mixed up in the next full episode of Epics, I thought I'd do another little sidebar, footnotes kind of thing, if you will. Because a lot of people are going to be thinking of one thing, and one thing only, because I'm focusing on Russia, and that area of Russia. And that will be the Tartarian Empire. An empire that, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, never existed, never has. I think we should start at the beginning, because Russian history is very, very comprehensive, very well dated, very well researched, and extremely expansive. In fact, if you watched the Tucker Carlson interview with Vladimir Putin, you will have heard him going through the vast majority of Russian history, but just with Ukraine alone. And this is the first thing that debunks the whole Tartarian narrative. A lot of this comes from misunderstandings, I think, a lot of the time. I don't think it's necessarily people deliberately trying to mislead. I just think it's possibly that they're not quite interpreting what they're seeing fully. A prime example is what you're seeing in the background now. And this is a very, very old Encyclopedia Britannica from 1790, I think, maybe before. And it talks about the Tartary region of Russia, commonly known as Grand Tartary. And this is what people tend to assume is talking about the Tartarian Empire. What you can read there is basically it's talking about 10 tribes. That's what it is. What the Grand Tartary was, it was just a collective term for the 10 tribes that lived in the northern parts of Russia, quite inhospitable parts of Russia. Frozen tundra, a lot of it. A lot of these tribes are nomadic as well, very nomadic. Move around quite a lot and move the herds around quite a lot. Like I said, because it's extremely frozen up there and gets bitterly, bitterly cold during the winter months. None of these tribes made up an empire, but it's just a collective term for all of those 10 tribes that inhabit that whole area, that massive area. Then there is the Tartar region of the Tartar province of Russia. Now, just like, say, the US or Europe, there's different sort of nation states, yeah, within a sort of, that was within Russia, or provinces that was within Russia. The actual capital city of Russia, up until roughly around 1945, I think. Maybe, no, actually, just before then, I think. Around the 1940s anyway. The actual capital city of Russia was in the Tartar province, and it was St. Petersburg. Catherine the Great, her palace, yeah, one of the most famous queens of Russia, of Russia. Her palace was in Crimea. It was actually in just outside of Sevastopol. And she commanded a vast empire. She fought against us, the British, during the Crimean War, funnily enough. But this has tended to be the main crux of people's sort of evidence for there being a Tartarian empire. Yeah? This is where it begins, should I say. They find this on a map and they assume that that's a vast country that's disappeared. It's not. It's not a vast country that's disappeared. Never has been. From there, people tend to start looking at the world's fairs that were being held in the 1800s. And this was a collective effort by every country to hold a festival of sorts, celebrating man's scientific achievements and future scientific achievements, where scientists and engineers could speculate on whatever, what they were going to be able to achieve in the next, like, 20, 30, 50, 100 years. Most of these cities within cities were built in less than 6 months. And the reason why they were built so fast was they were all wood framed and steel framed in some cases, plasterboard and wood, meant to imitate the Greco-Roman style that was popular at the time during the 1800s and the Georgian period of the early 1900s. This is why these things were demolished not long after, because they weren't meant to last. They weren't built to last. They never were. You can find countless accounts of people that visited those fairs all over the internet if you actually bother to look. There's videos of people that attended the St. Louis one in 1904. There's countless photographs of the construction of them and all sorts. But these tend to be ignored and called fakes by quite unscrupulous people, I have to say. Very unscrupulous people. These are usually the grifter types and the liars that are trying to make a quick buck from people believing the crap, basically. I've done quite a few videos just debunking the whole world stairs idea and how they were literally just film sets. That's all they were. In fact, in the background, as I've been talking, you've probably been seeing a clip that I did from a video going over the film sets. And if you look at how they're built, and then you look at the World's Fairs and construction photos, you can actually pretty much see how it was done, how they were all done. Another thing that's often touted is the mud flood idea, that a vast global flood of mud basically buried the vast majority of the evidence for this Tartarian empire, and people show photos of buildings being dug out of mud and everything else. Never actually taking into consideration that quite a lot of the buildings built from 1800s on, well, from 1700s onwards, quite a lot of the cities were built next to rivers and ports, so built on marshland with insecure foundations. So those buildings were sinking. In fact, Manhattan Island, all those buildings on Manhattan Island at the moment have been very famously sinking a few inches a year over the past 50 years. Constantly having to be raised. So a lot of these photos showing people digging these buildings out very often subsidence. Sometimes it's just fake, which also happens, unfortunately. People have begun to do Photoshop jobs. Other evidence is the lack of people in some photos from the 1800s, mid 1800s, and early 1900s, showing empty cities. Well, yeah, there's a good reason for that, though. The cameras back in those days had extremely long shutter speeds. It took very long exposures to do it. And if you just so happen to have someone moving past as you're trying to get this photo, it creates streaks in the photo, which is not only unsightly, but it also blocks out the view. So you have to take these photos in the early morning when there was far less people around, and leave them there for a couple of hours until they got their plates had enough exposure, and then they could get an actual decent photo. And even then, there's still people going past, there's still streaks, so they still had to basically touch them up from the negatives before developing them. There's so much evidence that points away from the Tartarian idea if you actually look at it objectively. Which brings me to the reasons why this has come out now. A lot of the Tartary work is based on Nicholas Flamenco's books, who was a very dubious alternative historian coming out of Russia. He was heavily against the Soviets and the Soviet Union. Or so you would think. Flamenco was more KGB than a lot of people. Just like China, Soviet Russia was hell-bent on essentially keeping a certain narrative together that painted them as the pinnacle of the technology that people had, and where all their history basically was leading them to. Anything that went against that narrative had to be expunged and discredited. Now, my idea for hyperbole, a lot of it's not a new idea. It's based on as is everyone's research is based on other people's research as well. Yuri Shilov being one, who's a Russian historian and archaeologist that had basically discovered a ratter in Ukraine, and several other people's works. Vitaly Gore is another one. Like I said, there's countless. And all of these were uncovered in a completely different history than what anyone in Russia had been told and what anyone in the world had been told. The Russian people are far older, and their society is far more advanced than quite a lot of other ancient cultures. Just like many other ancient cultures, after that society collapsed, it was then forgotten. The same thing happened in Doggerland, the same thing happened in Harati. The Hyperborean area was where the Caucasian people come from, where white people come from. That much I firmly believe. It's where we started. And we developed this society, Hyperborean society, and then, as always, a cataclysm happened and we had to move. Like I've already said before, that cataclysm was very likely related to them summoning in the Salamanic force. It still plagues us to this day, incident. But This kind of narrative goes completely against what we're taught in mainstream history, what we've been taught for the past 200 years. So many theories and concepts in our historical sense are being ripped to shreds and destroyed. And it's not just by people like me on the alternative side, or for instance, Jordan Maxwell or Michael Sarian or Our True History, or even Rather Than Untold. We're all looking for the truth at the end of the day, and this is what we're trying to hide. And the best way to hide something is to mask it beneath something that will ridicule it, discredit it, and destroy it. I firmly believe that that's what this Tartarian idea is. It first masks the truth of where we come from and what we could achieve back in our distant past. But it also gets it ridiculed and discredited and dismissed. And this is something that's been done countless times, over and over and over and over and over again throughout our academic history over the past 200 years. It's been the main goal of the system to have control over our past. Because as George Orwell said, those who control the past control the present, and those who control the present control the future. It's true. If we don't know what we're capable of and what we can achieve, we'll never be able to overcome anything. Now, many of you will still believe in Tartarian, that kind of concept. Unfortunately, it's been left to metastasize and fester, grow too exponentially. It's also been allowed to do that by social media. Well, social media, really. So what started off as a psyop to protect the Soviet Union and the Soviets' dominance over their people is now being used to destroy the truth. It also serves another purpose. It makes us doubt what we're being told, makes us doubt our history. As I've often said, sometimes what we're told is true. It's just that we don't like that truth. We often find something to take its place, rather they provide what takes its place. But it also means the more they destroy truth and the flow of information, the more they can control the narrative. They can make us doubt actual things that are happening around us. Doubt people that are actually truthful. People are lazy. I've often said this. Especially when it comes to difficult subjects like ancient history. That's because a lot of people don't have the time. Something sounds good, cool, different, new, and has an element of evidential truthfulness to it, like Tartaria does in some cases, just by the way it's presented. People are going to like that. Those ideas are going to grow. It's why work like mine, like little child, like tired dog, many of his breath, and virtually hidden from view. So you guys are lucky family. But this is essentially the origin and the methodology, the reasoning behind the whole Tartaria idea. What I'm going to show you in this new episode will ruin that, the whole Tartaria idea. But you need to know where it came from before I even touch on that. So to save the next episode being an hour and a half, hopefully to an hour long if I can, survive with this now. Anyway, thanks for watching.